Good morning to one and all present here. I am Dr. Durga, Associate Professor, Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at SLIMS. I'm here to speak on endometriosis. Endometriosis is defined as the presence of endometrial tissue, glands, and stroma outside the uterus. This tissue is not only morphologically similar to normal endometrium, but it is also functional. It typically is a disease of the reproductive years. It is estimated to occur in 7 to 10% of reproductive age women. Depending on the site of endometriosis, it could be classified as pelvic endometriosis or extrapelvic endometriosis. The sites seen where the deposits of endometrial tissues can be seen are over the tubes and ovaries. Within the uterus, it is called adenomyosis. In the peritoneum, intravesical fold, posterior cul-de-sac, and pelvic side wall. There are sites even other than the pelvic regions where the deposits of endometrial tissue can be seen. These sites are over the vulva, vagina, and cervix. Some other non-gynecological sites are seen in the bowel, lungs, and pleural cavity. Could be seen in skin also, where surgical site scars or during episiotomy, or in lymph glands, nerves, and brain also, the endometrial tissue can develop. So this is a picture showing the deposits of endometrial tissue over the uterus. So it is more predominant over the posterior surface of uterus, and these endometrial tissues cause extensive scarring and inflammatory reaction and adhesions formation between the posterior structures like the rectum, bowel, and to the anterior structures like the bladder also. We could see deposits over the pelvic side wall and also over the ovaries. Although signs and symptoms of endometriosis have been described since 1800, its widespread occurrence was acknowledged only during this century. So endometriosis is an estrogen-dependent disease. 3 theories has been proposed to explain the histogenesis of endometriosis. One is the ectopic transplantation of endometrial tissue. The other one, coelomic metaplasia, and the other one is induction theory. No single theory can account for the location of endometriosis in all the cases. The transplantation theory, originally proposed by Sampson in the mid-1920s, is based on the assumption that endometriosis is caused by the seeding or implantation of endometrial cells by transtumor regurgitation during menstruation. The coelomic metaplasia theory, which was proposed by Mayer, could explain the endometriosis in nearly all ectopic sites. It is a transformation or metaplasia of coelomic epithelium into endometrial tissue that has been proposed as a mechanism for the origin of endometriosis. Induction theory. The induction theory is in principle an extension of the coelomic metaplasia theory. It proposes that an endogenous undefined biochemical factor can induce undifferentiated peritoneal cells to develop into endometrial tissue. This theory has been supported by experiments in rabbits but has not been substantiated in women and primates. The lymphatic and vascular metastasis theory. Alban suggests that endometriosis could result from the lymphatic and hematogenous dissemination of endometrial cells. There is extensive communication of lymphatics between the uterus, tubes, ovaries, pelvic and vaginal lymph nodes, kidneys, and umbilicus. This explains the disease affecting remote areas like muscles, lungs, skin, etc. Genetic factors. The risk of endometriosis is 7 times greater if a first-degree relative has been affected by endometriosis. Multifactorial inheritance has been postulated. Monozygotic twins are markedly concordant for endometriosis. A worldwide collaborative project, the Oxford Endometriosis Gene Study, has been organized to identify a genetic basis for endometriosis. The steroid receptor genetics and association of estrogen receptor gene polymorphisms with endometriosis has been reported. Aneuploidy. Epithelial cells of endometriotic cyst are monoclonal, but normal endometrial glands are polyclonal. Recent studies using comparative genomic hybridization or multicolor in situ hybridization showed aneuploidy of various chromosomes like 11, 16, and 17. Loss of heterozygity. Microsatellite DNA assays reveal an allelic imbalance, loss of heterozygosity in P16 or the GALT or P53 or OPO-A2 loci in patients with endometriosis. The immunological factors. Although retrograde menstruation appears to be a common event in women, not all women who have retrograde menstruation have endometriosis. So it has been hypothesized that the disease may develop as a result of reduced immunological clearance of viable endometrial cells from the pelvic cavity. Decreased clearance of the peritoneal fluid endometrial cells may be due to reduced natural killer cell activity or decreased macrophage activity. There could be also be decreased cell-mediated cytotoxicity towards autologous endometrial cells. There is no clinical evidence, however, that the prevalence of endometriosis is increased in immunosuppressed patients. Substantial evidence suggests that endometriosis is associated with a state of subclinical peritoneal inflammation marked by increased peritoneal fluid volume, increased peritoneal fluid white blood cell concentration, and increased inflammatory cytokines, growth factors, and angiogenesis promoting substances. Macrophages or other cells may promote the growth of endometrial cells by secretion of growth and angiogenic factors such as epidermal growth factor. There is increasing evidence that local inflammation and secretion of prostaglandins is related to differences in endometrial aromatase activity between women with and without endometriosis. Now we shall discuss about the clinical presentation of the endometriosis. Endometriosis should be suspected in women with subfertility, dysmenorrhea, dyspareunia, or chronic pelvic pain. However, endometriosis may also be asymptomatic. The pain. In adult women, dysmenorrhea may be especially suggestive of endometriosis if it begins after years of pain-free menses. Dysmenorrhea often starts before the onset of menstrual bleeding and continues throughout the menstrual period. In adolescence, the pain may be present after menarche without an interval of pain-free menses. The distribution of pain is variable, but most often is bilateral. The 3 Ds of endometriosis represent dysmenorrhea, dyspareunia, and deep-seated pelvic pain. A common observation is that some women with extensive endometriosis have little or no pain, whereas others with only minimal endometriosis complain of severe pain. Very severe pain, however, is associated with deeply infiltrating endometriosis. Local symptoms can arise from rectal, urethral, and bladder involvement. Lower back pain can occur. Dyspareunia may be associated with deep infiltrating subperitoneal endometriosis. The other common association or the presentation of endometriosis is a subfertility. An association between endometriosis and subfertility is generally accepted, although numerous mechanisms have been proposed. Ovulatory dysfunction, luteal insufficiency, luteinized unruptured follicle syndrome, recurrent abortion, altered immunity, and intraperitoneal inflammation are some of the proposed mechanisms for subfertility. The association between fertility and minimal or mild endometriosis remains controversial. Endocrinological abnormalities. Endometriosis has been associated with anovulation, abnormal follicular development with impaired follicular growth, reduced circulating A2 levels during the pre-ovulatory phase, disturbed luteinizing hormone surge patterns, premenstrual spotting, the luteinized unruptured follicular syndrome, and galacturia and hyperprolactinemia. The extrapelvic endometriosis, although often asymptomatic, should be suspected when symptoms of pain or a palpable mass occur outside the pelvis in a cyclical pattern. Intestinal tract, especially the colon and the rectum, is the most common site of extrapelvic disease and may cause abdominal and back pain. Abdominal distension, cyclical rectal bleeding, constipation, and obstruction may be the presenting features. Ureteral involvement can lead to obstruction and result in cyclical pain, dysuria, and hematuria. Pulmonary endometriosis can manifest as pneumothorax, hemothorax, or hemoptysis during menses. Umbilical endometriosis should be suspected when a patient has a palpable mass and cyclic pain in the umbilical area. Scar endometriosis may present with cyclical pain and swelling. Clinical examinations recommend that pelvic examination has to be performed at the time of menses when tenderness is easier to detect. The vulva, vagina, and cervix should be inspected for any signs of endometriosis, although the occurrence of endometriosis in these areas is rare. The uterus is often in a fixed retroversion and the mobility of the ovaries and fallopian tubes is reduced. The other possible signs of endometriosis include uterosacral or cul-de-sac nodularity, cervical displacement due to uterosacral scarring, painful swelling of the rectovaginal septum, and unilateral follicular uh, ovarian cystic enlargement. The imaging studies. The classic chocolate cyst of the ovary is a result of a blood-filled cavity within an endometrioma. Ultrasonography and MRI can be helpful in diagnosing endometriomas. However, neither can diagnose small peritoneal implants or adhesions. Although transvaginal ultrasonography is highly accurate in diagnosing ovarian endometriomas, hemorrhagic cysts account for a significant false positive rate. Now, this is an ultrasound picture of endometriotic cyst, which shows fine stripling inside the ovary, which is a ground glass appearance. The CA125 assay. Serum levels of the CA125 are often elevated in patients with endometriosis and correlate with both the degree of disease and the response to treatment. Serum CA125 determinations may be able to differentiate endometriotic from non-endometriotic benign adnexal cysts, especially when combined with a transvaginal ultrasound. Laparoscopic findings, the gold standard diagnostic procedure. During diagnostic laparoscopy, the pelvic and abdominal cavity should be systematically investigated for the presence of endometriosis. This examination should include a complete inspection and palpation in a clockwise or a counterclockwise fashion with a blunt probe of the bowel, bladder, uterus, tubes, ovaries, cul-de-sac, and broad ligament. Laparoscopic view of peritoneal lesions. Characteristic findings include typical lesions on the serosal surface of the peritoneum. They are powder burn or gunshot lesions. These are black, dark brown, or bluish nodules or small cyst containing old hemorrhage surrounded by variable degree of fibrosis. Scarring of the peritoneum causes adhesions. Endometriosis can appear as subtle lesions, including red implants, pedicle, vesicular, polypoid, hemorrhagic, red flame-like, serous or clear vesicles, white plaques, or scarring. Yellow-brown discoloration of the peritoneum and subovarian adhesions. So these are the pictures of the laparoscopic views of endometriosis. The first picture shows a chocolate cyst. Two chocolate cysts can be seen on either side. This is a powder burn or a classic gunmetal deposits, which could be seen. The dark regions of endometriosis, these have been called as black blue lesions or gunpowder lesions or gunmetal lesions. Now this is a red raspberry or a purple raspberry spot, which is seen on the left uterosacral ligament. And this is a picture of the uterus, and this is a uterosacral ligament. Where this is a normal left ovary, where the fimbria ovea, the soft fluffy fimbria of a normal left fallopian tube. So these are the classical pictures of endometriotic deposits. Now this is a closer picture where you see the gunmetal or the gunpowder, the bluish appearance of the endometriotic vesicles, which are seen over the uterosacral ligament. This is another picture, a lab picture showing the anterior surface of the uterus, which shows a classical endometriotic deposits. Now this is a picture where you can see two endometriomas, the right and left endometriomas with the uterus, and a good degree of adhesions can be seen between the uterus, the posterior structures with the rectum and with the ovaries. This extensive adhesions is responsible for the most of the pain which is experienced by the patient. So upon closer view, these 5 small areas of endometriosis have a reddish brown to bluish appearances. This is an example of an extensive pelvic endometriosis. In this picture, you see the dense adhesions which is caused because of excessive scarring and old hemorrhagic spots which could be seen there in the pelvic regions. Ovarian endometriosis. The diagnosis of ovarian endometriosis is facilitated by careful inspection of all sides of both ovaries, which may be difficult when adhesions are present in more advanced stages of disease. With the superficial ovarian endometriosis, lesions can be both typical and subtle. Large ovarian endometriotic cyst, endometrioma, are usually located on the anterior surface of the ovary and are associated with retraction, pigmentation, and adhesions to the posterior peritoneum. These ovarian endometriotic cysts often contain a thick, viscous, dark brown fluid, the chocolate fluid, composed of hemocitrin derived from the previous intra-ovarian hemorrhage. Now, this is the dark fluid which is coming out from the ovarian endometrioma. This is a section through an enlarged 12 centimeters ovary to demonstrate a cystic cavity filled with old blood typical for endometriosis with the formation of an endometriotic or a chocolate cyst. Histological confirmation. The histological confirmation is essential in diagnosis of endometriosis. Microscopically, endometriotic implants consist of endometrial glands and stroma with or without hemocitrin-laden macrophages. So this is a histological picture where we see the endometrial glands along with numerous collections of hemocitrin-laden macrophages. The American Society for Reproductive Medicine, which we call it as ASRM, has revised the classification of endometriosis at stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4. Stage 1 is minimal, where the scoring is between 1 to 5. Stage 2 is mild, the score is from 6 to 15. Stage 3 is moderate, where the score is from 16 to 40. And stage 4 is severe, where the score is greater than 40. Now, this is this revised American Society of Reproductive Medicine classification, where the patients of endometriosis. Here, the patient's details and the staging of the disease of stage 1, 2, 3, 4 has been noted down. And here, the sites and the size of the endometriotic deposits are also seen. So, the endometriosis, and depending on whether it is in the ovary or in the peritoneum, and depending on whether it is superficial or deep, and also depending on its size, less than 1 centimeters, 1 to 3, and greater than 3 centimeters, the scoring has been allotted. Separate initial high scores have been allotted to endometriotic deposits seen in the posterior cul-de-sac, causing obliteration of the endometriotic deposits. So if it is a partial obliteration, we give a score of 4, whereas a complete obliteration, we give a score of 40. And depending on the amount of adhesions, whether it is flimsy or dense adhesions, whether it is present on the ovaries or on the tubes, on the right side or on the left side, depending on the enclosure levels, less than 1/3, 1/3 to 2/3, or greater than 2/3, different scores have been allotted. So if the total score is greater than 40, we say it is a stage 4 endometriosis and it is severe. When the score is less than 5, we call it as a stage 1 endometriosis. And definite figures have also been mentioned there. So this is an example of that staging and giving a particular score to the disease. The surgical treatment. In most cases, preservation of reproduction to function is desirable. The least invasive and least expensive approach that is effective should be used. Goal is to excise or coagulate all visible endometriotic lesions and associated lesions. It is also recommended to cause adhesolysis. Laparoscopy can be used in most women, and this technique decreases the cost, morbidity, and possibility of recurrence of adhesions postoperatively. Laparotomy should be reserved for patients with advanced stage disease who cannot undergo a laparoscopic procedure and for those in whom fertility conservation is not necessary. Peritoneal endometriosis. Endometriosis lesions can be removed during laparoscopy by surgical excision with stars, with scissors, bipolar coagulation, or laser methods using carbon dioxide laser, a potassium titanium phosphate laser, or an argon laser. Now we see here the surgical laparoscopy where the endometriotic implants seen over the uterus or in the bowel or over the rectum or over the bladder, they are being excised or could be burnt away, or the implants can be removed with the laser. So this is a picture showing the laparoscopic excision of the endometrial deposits. Ovarian endometriosis. Superficial ovarian lesions can be vaporized. Small ovarian endometrioma less than 3 centimeters in diameter can be aspirated, irrigated, and inspected with ovarian cystoscopy for intracystic lesions. Their inferior wall can be vaporized to destroy the mucosal lining of the cyst. Large, greater than 3 centimeters in diameter, ovarian endometrioma should be aspirated, followed by incision and removal of the cyst wall from the ovarian cortex. To prevent recurrence, the cyst wall of the endometrioma must be removed and the normal ovarian tissue must be preserved. Adhesolysis. The removal of endometriosis-related adhesions, which is called adhesolysis, should be performed carefully. Routine use of pharmacological or liquid agents to prevent postoperative adhesions after fertility Surgery cannot be recommended based on evidence from randomized controlled trials. The other sides of endometriosis, as in deep rectovaginal and rectosigmoid endometriosis. The surgical excision of deep rectovaginal and rectosigmoid endometriosis is difficult and can be associated with major complications. Postoperative bowel perforations with peritonitis have been reported in 2 to 3% of the cases. LUNA, laparoscopic uterosacral nerve ablation procedure, is another recommended and promising procedure in surgery for endometriosis. Extra pelvic endometriosis, surgical excision may be difficult. Scar endometriosis may need excision. Preoperative hormonal treatment. In patients with a severe endometriosis, it has been recommended that surgical treatment be preceded by a 3-month course of medical treatment to reduce the vascularization and nodular size. However, a recent randomized study comparing 3 months of pre-operative treatment with GnRH and no treatment in 75 women with moderate to severe endometriosis failed to show a significant difference in ease of surgery between the two groups. Postoperative medical therapy. The postoperative medical therapy may be required in patients with incomplete surgical resection and persistent pain. Treatment should last at least 3 to 6 months and pain relief may be of short duration, presumably because endometriosis recurs. So we shall now see the medical treatment of endometriosis. Although hormonal therapy of infertility associated with endometriosis is not of proven value, medical therapy for dysmenorrhea, dyspareunia, and pelvic pain associated with endometriosis is very successful, although the relief of may be for only a short term. The basics for the medical management. Implants of endometriosis react to steroid hormones in a manner somewhat but not exactly similar to normally stimulated endometrium. Because estrogen is known to stimulate the growth of endometriosis, hormonal therapy has been designed to suppress estrogen synthesis, thereby inducing atrophy of the ectopic endometrial implants or interrupting the cycle of stimulation and bleeding. Manipulation of the endogenous hormonal milieu is the basis for the medical management of endometriosis. Oral contraceptives. The treatment of endometriosis with a continuous low-dose monophasic combination contraceptives for 6 to 12 months was originally used to reduce pseudo-pregnancy caused by the resultant amenorrhea and desudalization of the endometrial tissue. In addition, the subsequent amenorrhea induced by oral contraceptives should potentially reduce the amount of retrograde menstruation, one of the many risk factors proposed in the etiology of endometriosis. Pathologically, oral contraceptive use is associated with desubalization of endometrial tissue, necrobiosis, and possibly absorption of the endometrial tissue. Unfortunately, there is no convincing evidence that medical therapy with oral contraceptives offers stabilizing therapy. Instead, the endometrial implants survive the induced atrophy and in most patients reactivate after termination of the treatment. Any low-dose combination of oral contraceptives containing 30 to 25 micrograms milligram of ethinyl estradiol used continuously can be effective in the management of endometriosis. Progestins may exert an anti-endometriotic effect by causing initial residualization of endometrial tissue followed by atrophy. They can be considered as a first choice for the treatment of endometriosis because they are as effective as Danazol or GnRH analogs and have a lower cost and lower incidence of side effects than these agents. So progestins form a very important role, and that too progestins like Dynogest has been really made and remarkable changes in the patients who experience endometriosis. Medroxyprogesterone acetate 150 mg given intramuscularly every 3 months is effective for the treatment of pain associated with endometriosis. Magestrol acetate has been administered in a dose of 40 grams per day with good results. The other treatment strategies have also included the dydrogesterone, which is about 20 to 30 milligrams per day, either continuously or on days 5 to 25, and linezolid 10 milligrams per day. Nowadays, a local progesterone treatment with a newer generation intrauterine device, that is a levonorgestrel releasing intrauterine device system for 12 months, has resulted in a significant reduction in dysmenorrhea, dyspareunia, and pelvic side pain. But however, the cost effectiveness of the treatment has been approved, and whereas cost of Mirena releasing levonorgestrel releasing IUD like Marinas, which may cost around 2,500 to 3,000. Progesterone antagonist. Progesterone antagonist and progesterone receptor modulators like azoprisnil may suppress endometriosis based on their anti-proliferative effects on the endometrium without the risk for hypoestrogenism or bone loss that occurs with the GnRH treatment. GnRH continuous treatment with the GnRH results in estrogen deficiency, which may in turn causes osteoporotic changes. Hence, we give add-back therapy with estrogens if the GnRH treatment is prolonged for more than 6 months. Mifepristone, that is RU486, is a potent antiprogestogen with a direct inhibitory effect on the human endometrial cells, and in high doses, it has an anti-glucocorticoid action. The recommended dosages is 25 to 100 milligram per day. Mifepristone 50 to 100 milligram per day reduces the pelvic pain and induces 55% regression of the lesions without significant side effects. The newer progesterone called gestrinone is a 19-not-testosterone derivative with androgenic, anti-progestogenic, anti-estrogenic, and anti-gonadotrophic properties. It acts centrally and peripherally to increase the free testosterone and decrease the sex hormone binding globulin levels. Therefore, it exerts an androgenic effect. It decreases the serum estradiol levels to early follicular phase levels. That means it has an anti-estrogenic effect. Decreases the mean luteinizing hormone levels and obliterate the LH and FSH surge. Hence, it is called an anti-gonadotrophic effect. Gestrinone causes cellular inactivation and degeneration of endometriotic implants, but not their disappearance. The standard dose is 2.5 milligram twice a week for 6 to 9 months. So this gestrinone, which is a not testosterone, it is a progestational drug which has a mainly androgenic side effect and an anti-estrogenic and an anti-gonadotrophic property. Thereby, it induces an ovulation and it prevents any new endometriotic deposits developing. Danazol. Pharmacological properties of danazol include suppression of GnRH or gonadotrophin secretion, direct inhibition of steroidogenesis, increased metabolic clearance of estradiol and progesterone. The multiple effects of danazol produces a high androgen, low estrogen environment that does not support the growth of endometriosis, and the amenorrhea that is produced prevents new seeding of implants from the uterus into the peritoneal cavity. Hence, danazol is started with treatment dosage about 400 milligram daily or 200 milligram twice a day, and the dose is increased further if necessary to achieve amenorrhea and relieve the symptoms. Local danazol treatment using a vaginal danazol ring, which releases about 1500 milligram, has been shown to be effective for pain relief in deep infiltrating endometriosis without the classical danazol side effects or detectable serum danazol levels while allowing ovulation and conception. Now, this is a very recent trial and where this danazol medication has been kept vaginally as a vaginal danazol ring without its normal side effects of androgenic properties and allowing ovulation and conception to occur. Gonadotropin releasing hormone agonist. The GnRH agonist bind to pituitary GnRH receptors and stimulate the LH and FSH synthesis and release. However, the agonists have a much longer biological half-life of 3 to 8 hours than the endogenous GnRH, which is about only 3.5 minutes, resulting in the continuous exposure of GnRH receptors to GnRH agonist activity. This causes a loss of pituitary receptors and downregulation of the GnRH activity, resulting in low FSH and LH levels. Consequently, the ovarian steroid production is suppressed, providing a medically induced and reversible state of pseudomenopause. A direct effect of GnRH agonist on ectopic endometrium is also possible because expression of the GnRH receptor gene has been documented in ectopic endometrium and because direct inhibition of endometrial cells has been demonstrated in vitro. So giving GnRH agonist will cause continuous stimulation of the GnRH receptors over the pituitary, but this continuous stimulation will cause down regulation and thereby the amount of FSH and LH produced by the pituitary will be finally be less. So these agents include leuprolide, which is a GnRH agonist, 3.75 milligram monthly. Other injections are buserelin, nafirelin, esterelin, goserelin, desorelin, and triptorelins. These drugs are inactive orally and must be administered intramuscularly, subcutaneously, or by intranasal absorption. The best therapeutic effect is often associated with an estradiol dose of 20 to 40 picograms per ml. These so-called depot formulations are attractive because of the reduced frequency of administration and because nasal administration can be complicated by variations in absorption rates and problems with patient compliance. The other drugs are aromatase inhibitors, which are anastrozole, 1 milligram per day, and selective estrogen receptor modulators like raloxifene. Some of the non-hormonal medical therapy, modulation of cytokines. First one, recombinant human tumor necrosis factor alpha binding protein effectively inhibits the development of endometriosis and endometriosis related adhesions. Number two is immune enhancing modulators like loxodribine and levamisole. Anti-inflammation is now been brought about by other newer drugs like leukotriene receptor antagonist and oral pentoxifylline. Efficacy of medical treatment. Based on the published studies, medroxyprogesterone acetate, diazole, gestrinone, and GnRH agonist have similar efficacy in resolution of the laparoscopically documented disease and in pain alleviation. Disadvantages of medical therapy over surgical therapy include the high cost of hormone preparations, the high prevalence of side effects, and the higher recurrence rate of endometriosis. Conception is either impossible or contraindicated during medical treatment of endometriosis. There is no evidence that medical treatment of minimal to mild endometriosis leads to better chances of pregnancy than an expectant management. Recurrence. Endometriosis tends to recur unless definitive surgery is performed. The recurrence rate is about 5% to 20% per year, reaching a cumulative effect of 40%. After 5 years, the rate of recurrence increases with the stage of disease, the duration of follow-up, and the occurrence of previous surgeries. The likelihood of recurrence appears to be lower when endometriosis is located only on the right side of the pelvis than when compared to the left side is involved. Assisted reproduction and endometriosis. The treatment of endometriosis related infertility is dependent on the age of ovulation, the duration of infertility, the stage of endometriosis, and the involvement of ovaries, tubes, or both in the endometriosis process. Previous therapies or associated pain symptoms and the priorities of the patient. Assisted reproduction include controlled ovarian hyperstimulation with intrauterine insemination, IVF, and GIFT. IVF is a method of choice when distortion of the tubo-ovarian anatomy contraindicates the use of superovulation and intrauterine insemination. So for conclusion, endometriosis is a chronic, costly disease requiring long-term multidisciplinary treatment. Profound personal and economic impact underscores urgent need for continued research and improvement in diagnostic and treatment modalities. Timely intervention and appropriate multifactorial treatments may restore the quality of life, preserve or improve the fertility, and lead to permanent a long-term effective management in the absence of permanent cure. Thank you.